Hello, this is Ed Chapman, and this video cast is going to be covering nucleic acids, which is our fourth kind of macromolecule or our fourth kind of polymer. Nucleic acids are frequently called DNA and RNA. There are only two different kinds of nucleic acids, and all nucleic acids are built from monomers called nucleotides. All right? Now, nucleic acids, like DNA and RNA, are used to store inheritable information. So you probably have heard that DNA is what you inherit from your parents that gives you your genetics, so to speak. And how this works is the sequence or the order of nucleotides in the DNA polymer is what determines the sequence of amino acids in a protein polymer. So there is a relationship here that we're going to explore more when we get to genetics. Now, here is the structure of a DNA or an RNA nucleotide. And if you look here, there are three parts. You have what's called a phosphate group, represented here by a circle. You have a deoxyribose sugar, represented here by a pentagon. And you have a nitrogen base, represented here by a square. Now, because the sugar here is deoxyribose, this is a DNA nucleotide. Okay, and what makes it a DNA nucleotide is it contains deoxyribose. So that's what the D stands for. Now the base here could be any one of four different chemicals. It could be adenine, thymine, cytosine, or guanine. So there are four choices for the base. Okay, and this is for DNA nucleotides. RNA nucleotides are a little bit different. RNA nucleotides contain a different sugar, ribose. So this is where the R in RNA comes from, just like the D in DNA comes from deoxyribose. Otherwise, the structure of the nucleotides is pretty much the same. Now, there is one other difference. RNA nucleotides don't have any thymine, so thymine is not possible. It's replaced by a base called uracil, represented by a U. So the nitrogen bases you find in RNA are A, U, C, and G, and the ones you find in DNA are A, T, C, and G. And remember, when you're talking about these letters, you're technically only talking about the nitrogenous base part of the nucleotides. All right, now DNA nucleotides, as I said earlier, contain the sugar deoxyribose. That's where the D comes from. They also contain a phosphate group and the nitrogen bases. Okay, and here's a list of the nitrogen bases: adenine, cytosine, guanine, and thymine. RNA nucleotides contain a different sugar. As we looked at earlier, the sugar is called ribose. That's where the R in RNA comes from. They also contain a phosphate group and one of four different bases. Notice that we don't have thymine, we have uracil instead. So that means when you build a strand of DNA, and DNA strands are huge molecules, what you do is you assemble the nucleotides in a strand. So for example, I'm going to circle one nucleotide here. Okay. So this nucleotide has the sugar, the phosphate, and the base. Here's the next one that's bonded to it. Okay, sugar, phosphate, base. We have a this is a thymine base here. This is a guanine base here. You see the little G. Here's another one. Okay, and this one happens to be cytosine. And finally, we have our fourth nucleotide down here, which is adenine. All right. Now, notice how they hook together. Sugar to phosphate, sugar to phosphate, sugar to phosphate. That's what we call the backbone of a DNA strand. But the other half of the DNA molecule is exactly the same, but running in the opposite direction. So when this one's going this way, this one's going the other way. And there is a pairing operation here that happens between the nitrogen bases up the middle of the DNA ladder. But we'll talk more about that when we get to our genetics and DNA as a molecule unit. All right, so in your interactive notebook, I think you already have a glue-in that looks a lot like this, but you should, for the test, be able to tell me, okay, the monomers for carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids, and you should be able to tell me something about the main functions of carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, and nucleic acids. If you can do all those things, I can guarantee you at least a C grade on the test, all right? And how well you understand your notes is going to take it up to a B or an A. Thanks for listening, and we'll stop there. The next video cast is going to cover how enzymes work. Enzymes are a special kind of protein. Thanks for listening.